I did exactly the same thing for Sophie. Yeah, completely forgot to record it. Right, so it is now recording. Brilliant.
Thank you.
No problem. Thanks for reminding me. So yeah, this is a super simple garden. There's 3 design options. So obviously I've created just a very simple layout plan. This is going to be presented to the client. At the moment, there are no visuals. So kind of when you're doing your visuals, or whether you do your visuals, will depend on the project. So I'm just going to move where it's a bit lighter and a bit more comfortable. You may not, on a project with a small budget, you know, a garden like this, it's pretty obvious what's happening. And if your client can, oh God, I just realized also, sorry, not quite with it today. Let's do that. Okay, right. You should now be able to see the screen.
Yeah, we can, thanks.
Sorry. I'll wake up eventually. So yeah, whether you decide to do 3D visuals is kind of up to you, really. Again, your time is your money, basically, when you're a freelancer. So if you've only got a smallish design fee and your client refuses to pay for visuals, you know, then you don't need to worry about it. So I would say Vectorworks, which is what these drawings are done in, is kind of your bread and butter, basically. All the important stuff you'll use for Vectorworks. So your layout plan, your setting out plan, planting plan, construction details, you know, loads of other detailed bits and pieces. You'll receive drawings if you're working with architects or people who are going to make you bits of furniture or whatever. Those are the kind of things that you'll get into Vectorworks. SketchUp tends to be the fun stuff, basically, you know, but once the visuals are done, you won't bother with it, basically. It's just for kind of demonstrating stuff to your client. So this is one design option, and there's another one there. They want a hot tub on the other side, and then there's one here. So this is like super early stages, no dimensions, although I have drawn it accurately. And I will show, actually I'll show you in a second that file in Vectorworks. You can also, I know a lot of you guys use InDesign, which is great. To me, it's slightly over-specified for just putting a bunch of images on a page, which you can do in Vectorworks, and then you have everything in one file, and there's a publish feature. So this isn't really a construction detail. It's just to demonstrate to the client that because of the existing fence level, we are going to retain around the lawn with some sleepers, and the planting will be a lower level, but you might not really notice it. So it's quite straightforward, you know, it's not actually a technical drawing at all. And then all of these drawings reside within the same Vectorworks file, and these you can just copy and paste stuff straight from Google Images, and again, like the materials and stuff. So yeah, so that's a sort of example of an early stage project. This one's a bit more technical. So this is actually an area in Covent Garden. So these are kind of retail units, and we are proposing some metal planters and benches. So these are actually, what they sent was almost the whole block. You can see St. Martin's Courtyard. So it's just a kind of, you know, once you get into doing the kind of, I don't want to call it higher end stuff, but kind of, yeah, I guess it is property development and architects and so on. You're going to be working with a lot of technical drawings, and they'll all come in. You know, it's fine if you're just doing residential projects. You know, your contractor. Then, you know, by all means, hand draw. I've sort of started. You know, if you hate computers, basically, the thought of using them fills you with dread. You love drawing. You're quick at drawing. You know, you don't need to use Vectorworks. If you're going to be working with architects, either you need to use it or you need to bring in someone else who does. And there are loads of people like me who basically draw stuff for other people, and who will save you, you know, a lot of time and stress. If you don't enjoy it, you know, that life's too short to force yourself to do it. Basically, there are just get someone else to do it. You know, don't feel it's one skill that you need to learn. You know, you wouldn't learn how to do your account, you know, or you become an accountant just to do your accounts. So, you know, and I know that the SGD are now, you know, they understand that people farm out their drawings and stuff to get other people to do them. So yeah, that's just basically the DWG showing where they are in plan, showing where they are in elevations. There's a key giving the bench numbers, the width, and the planter numbers, the width, the height, the depth, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, another elevation.
Fiona, sorry, may I ask?
Yep.
Did they supply those images of the building, the
They
elevation?
did, yeah. So the architects will always supply stuff like that, plans and
Yeah.
elevations and so on. Yeah, no, you won't really have to be drawing stuff like that.
Okay.
You know, it's just the landscapey stuff. They'll generally send you a whole package of drawings. You know, at first, when I first started, so I left college 2010, 2011. And at this start, I was just like, oh my God, what is all this stuff? I just don't understand it. But the more you work with it, you know, and as long as you're accurate, you kind of just get, you know, you get used to all of it, and you can just disregard half of it because it's just too much detail and we don't really need to think about it. And then these are just some, not even technical drawings, just early stages for the planning department, showing what the planters and the benches would look like.
Fiona, can I just come in there?
Yep.
Obviously, the people you're talking to at the moment are plants and planting design. When the principles and practice course, do you do the same thing for the principles and practice course? Talk about how they can use.
Oh, I thought this was all the principles and practice course.
No.
Oh.
We're on plants and planting, so I'm just a little worried that some of this stuff may make people so scared that they think,
Oh, I'm never going to use it. That's definitely not what I want. Let me just find you then some.
I know you talked to Sophie's Wednesday group, which was plants and planting, and Thursday group, which is at Enfield were plants and planting.
Oh, are they? Oh, well, so I did it there. You're getting the exact same session as
Okay, well that's fine, but I just think if you could possibly, I mean, obviously not change it all, but I just don't want people to get worried early on that, you know, that they can never use it. And so if you could just remember that, I mean, obviously for plants and planting, you need layouts and you need bed shapes and you need, so it is relevant, and you know, and quite a lot of people. We found that quite a lot of people go on and do CAD at this stage because they're so fed up with drawing bloody circles.
Yes, I'm just opening a planting plan here. So yeah, I mean that common garden plan is kind of those drawings. I mean, I didn't draw. All I did was put the rectangles on it. So you're kind of, a lot of the time it's not that complicated, the stuff you're drawing. You know, you're drawing in exactly the same way as you would do by hand, basically. The planting plans on Vectorworks, and this is an example here where they've used colour, you know, because my 2D CAD course is kind of separate to the main syllabus at Vectorworks, you know, as the garden design stuff. So I don't really have to adhere to them being done in a particular way. So this student has done them in kind of pastel colours. So yeah, the planting plans, you can actually do planting plans in Vectorworks and not know anything about Vectorworks really, apart from how to set up the plants. And once you set up the plants, you literally, it's click, 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 click. You can put the spacing in, you can draw mass planting areas, and I'll come back to that and show you how to do it. And it then generates a plant schedule down there, and it will tell you, so you can send that directly to the nursery. It's got the quantity, it's got the size you want them. You can have another column with notes and say if you want substitutions and so on. So in that regard, and I find using the colours makes it really clear and easy to use. Yeah, the planting plans, there is no other bit of software that I know of that does the planting plans. AutoCAD is a good substitute for Vectorworks, but it doesn't have the planting plan functionality that Vectorworks does. So yeah, that is certainly a good feature. I'm just going to check, no questions. So moving on, I'll just show you a couple of SketchUp visuals if I just open those up. So SketchUp, I mean, is a very quick and easy way to visualize stuff for your clients, basically. Let's do that, and yeah, launch. So yeah, these are two visuals basically of a very simple front garden that were done in SketchUp. And then they're kind of finished off in Photoshop. SketchUp on its own doesn't tend to look that great. Minimize that.
Why is that? Why is that, Fiona?
So I just show you. So that is the SketchUp. What is it? Let's see. So yeah, that's SketchUp on its own.
Yeah.
So by the time you've kind of put some watercolory filters on and sort of fiddled around with it, you can knock it back I mean, on its own, it looks a bit like, I always think it looks a bit like a, you know, a video game, just a bit
Yes.
flat and computer. I mean, that's not bad, and it's clear enough. But it's very easy to make these graphics in SketchUp. SketchUp, of the 2 bits of software, SketchUp is by far the easiest to pick up. You can get it for free. Photoshop is £10 a month, you know, so in terms of kind of having something that's immediately usable, and actually, you know, you can give the vibe of the planting quite well. I think you can kind of, by the time you've messed about with it a bit, you can kind of give the impression of what kind of planting that's going to be. You know, you can see steeper and salvia and that kind of thing, slightly, you know, planted in clumps of 3 or 5 or whatever. There's a lot of free material online that you can download to get those plants and build up the drawings. So yeah, of the 2 packages, probably at an earlier stage, SketchUp is the one to go for. If I will just open that up. So this is SketchUp. I'll start just by looking at SketchUp. So this is that model in SketchUp. So you can see you're working in a 3D space. You know, that 3D space is almost infinite, you know, and it gives you this horizon. You can accidentally zoom out and you know, not know where you are, but everything will always remain on this axis, and you can just click that button and you zoom back into it. So I've basically drawn this and I've downloaded these plants, and you'll see most of these plants are what they call 2D face me plants. So if I look from above, I don't see them, but as I pan down, they're there, and they are like following my mouse as I move around. And so what I've done is basically set up these 2 scenes. You'll see on the right hand side there are layers, and I can turn bits on and off. And I've set up another scene there, you know, to kind of bird's eye view looking at it.
So Fiona, just to ask you, I mean, I'm not sure how many people who are listening are really at all familiar with this, and some of them might be and some of them might not be, but they're from my memory, layers, you sort of, as you add different things, you create new layers, and so you can strip them back, take out the layers, and return to the basics, and is that right? Is that how layers work?
SketchUp, Vectorworks and Photoshop use layers very differently. In SketchUp, they've actually renamed layers. This is SketchUp 2019. In 2020, they've renamed layers to be tags, because the word layers isn't really accurate. In Vectorworks, which I'll go to in a second, the layers all stack up on each other. So it's like drawing on transparencies, and they all stack up. If you put the trees under your hard landscaping, you won't see them. In SketchUp, basically what they allow me to do is just turn stuff on and off.
Oh, right. Okay.
And I had the cars on a different layer, because when you're working, you want to be able to get right back into the corner, say, and change that hedge. You know, you want to turn the plants off. You know, if I want to change the drive surface, I might want to turn those cars off. So yeah, they kind of work slightly differently.
So are the tags things that you create? Can you create them and give them a name?
Yes, so you just go, let's move that in there. I go, right, new one, let's call it trees.
Yeah.
Created a new layer. And so in SketchUp, if I press this button up here, the 3D warehouse, so I put in a tree, just search for tree, find maybe, just download those. So yeah, you can basically scroll through. I mean, there's hundreds of different models. You can have your own login. You set up these things called collections, which are like a folder of items. So you could have, you know, large deciduous trees, you could have small fruit trees, you can have ferns, grasses, perennials, there's furniture, you know, anything you could imagine. You could probably put in, I don't know, Mr. Blobby, and find a model in Mr. Blobby. Like, there's just anything you can imagine, because it was originally developed by Google for Google Earth, to give people a really easy way to put models into Google Earth. That is taking a while to download. So yeah, there is a lot of content there that you.
Fiona, sorry to interrupt. So all of those plants that you put in the garden, you would have looked up echinacea, or are any of them ones that you create files of from your own collection, or?
No, these are all from the warehouse. Oh, this is really annoying. Come on. I probably would have put in, yes, some of them, like there's a verbena in there, I would have put in. Yeah, I may well have put in echinacea. Some of them are just under plant. There's a grass here, which I probably would have put in miscanthus to find it. Just going to let that download. But yeah, you can also just put them in files on your computer rather than having them in the warehouse and having to download them all the time. Oh, is that then? Yes, bro. So yeah, so I've just downloaded that model of trees from the warehouse. I can then kind of rotate that, make it bigger. You know, I could go in and move all those trees separately. So it's quite easy just to sort of download things and put them straight into your model. And you'll see it uses these axes. So as I move stuff, it's locking here to the blue axis, which is the height axis. So you can just kind of, yeah, you're moving stuff around and you know which direction they're going in. Basically, if it's locked to the red axis, it's going to be going left and right, and front and back is the green axis. So in terms of starting a drawing yourself, this is a project, a huge project that I've just started working on. What I will generally do is you import the PDF and you'll scale it up. You know, obviously you're probably going to be working with much simpler areas. And all I have been doing with this is just using the line tool, and I'm just literally just drawing over it. You know, getting all the planting beds in and so on. You know, just using the line tool and doing it all fairly straightforwardly like that. So yeah, it takes a little bit of time, but you know, it's fairly quick to do it. Basically, you can import DWG files, but actually, yeah, just drawing it.
What's a DWG file?
A DWG file is what's it called? An AutoCAD file. Right. So sometimes designers or architects will send you a DWG file, which is it's just a different file format. Basically, once you get a site, if you ever get a site survey, you'll get it in a DWG file. Basically, right. It's a more technical file. Like this is a PDF, and obviously I've scaled it up. But you know, if I measure this here, and it says, what is that, 2274 mil? You know, the actual measurement of the drawing that whoever it is that did it might be slightly different. You know, it's just not as accurate using a PDF, and you can see all the lines are a bit blurry
yeah.
as you zoom into it. So yeah, I would basically build this drawing up, draw it all flat. You then go round and you would make everything a group. And so a group will, so I might make that set of steps a group, and then I can double click, I can go into that group. And the way you'll build the height up is to start push and pulling things up. So I'll make that 150 mil, and you'll start just kind of pulling up the elements of your drawing like this, and moving and pulling things, and having them in their group makes them a separate object. If you don't have stuff in a group, what happens is, you see here as I try and move this around, it gets stuck to everything else. So the key thing, if you're going to use SketchUp, yeah, get something in, you just go File, Import, you'll find your PDF, you'll scale it up. And the way to scale it up is, I'll just create a new blank file. So you'll notice I'm using a lot of keyboard shortcuts here. If you look at any of the menu items, this is the same for any bit of software, you'll see, so here, undo, Command Z, or Control Z on a PC, cut, copy. Any of these tools, if I hover over them, rectangle R, so I know if I just press R, I get the rectangle tool. So to get, say you've got a piece of coursework, so if you want to start learning it, you've got a bit of time, you've got a piece of coursework, it's hand-drawn drawing, you know, you go File, Import. I am going to, let's go for, just import this Formal Gardens thing. It should, what I'll do is just copy that one. So you've imported a PDF. It should come in on your mouse. There's something slightly wrong with my computer at the moment. It's just not working. So it's come in, and it will come in at whatever size, you know, you sort of click and drag it, and it'll just come in at whatever size it wants to. So say this, you need to have a known dimension. So sometimes plans will have a scale bar at the bottom, and you can scale it off the back of that. So to scale it, let's say that I know that this dimension of this formal square bit is 10 meters. I get the tape measure tool, which is there. I'll zoom in a bit more. I click once, I move across, I click again, and then I type 10,000 and I press enter. And it says, do you want to resize the model? Yes. And that will resize this on the basis of that known dimension. So yeah, a scale bar or any known dimension. And you can then, even if it's just one bit, say it was just this area here you wanted to do, you can, the quickest way really is to just use the rectangle tool. And just go like this and just block it out, and then you'll delete that line and use the rectangle tool, so down there. And just delete the bits that you don't need, basically. And because you're creating visuals, you don't need to be that accurate.
Yeah, you're not doing a planting plan where you're trying to work out exactly how many plants to put in.
No, exactly. That said, you can do plans in SketchUp through a thing called layout. So there's, although, I mean, personally, I think Vectorworks, it's incredibly accurate. It's got great functionality, all the hatches and the hard landscaping features you can draw in, custom sized paviers, and set up what kind of pattern you want them laid in. The planting plans, you know, but SketchUp does have something called layout, which is basically, you know, you're drawing in 3D. So the thing with SketchUp, it is a 3D bit of software, and the clue is in the name. It's called SketchUp. It's very easy to use. So it's sort of not really geared up for very accurate drawing. However, if you go to a bird's eye view, so there's a thing, it is view, I've got this all, oh there. So camera standard views top, and then you go camera parallel projection. And you'll see here that you've kind of got almost a plan view. And if I save that and send it to, there's a button here at the top, which is send to layout. So when you get SketchUp, you'll get layout with it, or SketchUp Pro, you'll get layout with it. And it basically is a similar kind of thing to Vectorworks. So here I'm just going to pick A3 landscape bit of paper, and it will put your SketchUp model in the view that you've predefined on a piece of paper. So here it's come in, I'm going to set the scale to 1 to 100. That should update. So yeah, I've changed that scale. I'll just move it around and try and make sure it all fits. That's 1 to 100 on an A3 piece of paper. And then in here you can add, I think through the scrapbook, you know, arrows and temporary. So yeah, you can put like drawing titles and a north sign and scale bars and all that kind of thing. There's text boxes you can put in up here. Do that, yeah, and dimensions and you know, so on. So you it does give you very crude tools, basically. I know that Paul Hennessy, if you know Paul Hennessy, he is a complete SketchUp fanatic, and he uses it for everything. To me, it's not 100% designed to do this. Vectorworks is 100% designed to be a very accurate technical drawing package, and that's what it does. It does do 3D, but it's not great. You know, SketchUp, you can do 2D, but it's not that great.
As a matter of interest, how much does Vectorworks cost to buy now, a non-student, the professional one?
A non-student, the full version is 2,400 quid.
Yep.
So that is why I also say, yeah, if you hate computers, don't use it, but also think, you know, so you're going to graduate this course, you're going to be self-employed, so your time has to have a value. My time has a value. You know, my bike's broken, Do I pay 50 quid to take it to Halfords and get someone to fix it? Or do I sacrifice what could be like 3 hours out of my day watching YouTube channels, putting newspaper on the floor, getting my hands dirty, fixing my bike, feeling angry that I can't do it, going back and watching more YouTube tutorials, you know? So it's kind of like, do you want to spend 2,400 quid on buying Vectorworks? The evening course at Capel Manor is 500 odd quid. It's 35 hours of your life gone on a Tuesday evening. Admittedly, you get me and the dog and, you know, other nice people, but it's still, you're still studying. Then you've probably got another 100 hours or so to get really good at it. You know, versus just sending someone, and the stuff people send me, just fine, you know, I'm not speaking down of this person at all, because actually, you know, you can, if a lot of people, they just want to relinquish control, you know, and just send you something. So those design options that I showed you, the first thing that I showed you, that's what he sent me. And a very crude site survey from the architect, which was that. You know, so I scaled that up on the basis that that's 1 to 100 at A3, and I used that. And obviously this sketch isn't right because it's really squat and the garden's much longer. But obviously if you want to keep control over all the dimensions and actually what it looks like, you would sketch it up by hand first. So none of these, sorry, I'm slightly reeling off into kind of different areas. Neither of these packages are a substitute for hand drawing. You know, you will always hand draw stuff. You will always do that repetition and resolving any problems. The same with planting. You know, you'll just scribble stuff down, right, clump of this, oh no, not sure that's going to work. Maybe get your coloured pencils out. You know, you'll never go straight into SketchUp because you'll never resolve those problems in a piece of software. So, but in both examples, in their different ways, you're just copying stuff out. You know, this, I basically just copied this, you know, and I adapted it to fit the site survey, and I used my common sense, and I'm like, well, I'm going to make those borders 1.2 meters wide, so I think that's a nice width. You know, you're going to make the stair treads 300 or 400 mil wide, you know, so you're kind of, yeah, you are copying it, but you're just solving the more detailed problems as you
go. So in this case, you're doing a lot of, making a lot of the design decisions on that particular one.
Yeah, this client is a landscaper. Right. He's he's one of those people who's really posh but very shambolic. He's a kite surfer and a hippie, and he's just always, you know, completely chaotic. So I think he's quite happy to pass stuff on. Other people get me to draw stuff up, you know, and it's immaculate, and all they want is to get it into CAD so that they look, you know, they've got an architect client or something, you know, and they look good. So it kind of, yeah, the range of stuff that people send me is like, yeah, you wouldn't believe it. I've had far worse stuff than that, from actually much bigger designers as well.
No, that's really interesting, actually, because I mean, I do think one of the things is that people get worried about this sort of stuff and think, oh gosh, I have to have it. And the answer, as you have said, is no, you don't have to have it. I think that the only time that you should seriously get it is if you're prepared to spend the money and you're prepared to spend the time unpaid, as you say, the 100 hours to get good at it. And if you're going to use it consistently, because otherwise, if you don't use it because you're doing part-time or you have a break or, you know, you forget, and then you've got to start all over again.
Yeah. You definitely need to commit to it. The only other you know, you could go and intern or work for a designer. I mean, when I left college, I worked for £10 an hour for another designer doing all their CAD drawings. So I got good at it, and I got to learn being in a studio and all of their design stuff, and their work is amazing. And, you know, you get those contacts. So it's kind of, you know, it's also what you can afford to do. People don't really talk about that. They just talk about how much money can you make and what can I charge and blah, blah, blah. But actually, if you can afford to do it and say you want to work in a design studio, then yeah, working for free or very cheaply is a really good way to get good, because you're just churning out stuff all the time. And if you want to work in a design studio, that's all they care about. You know, none of the big designers do their own Vectorworks. I can tell you that. They've got whole teams of people who do half of them can barely attach a file to an email. You know, they've just got people there for them, and they've developed good ways of working with those people in order for them to do their work. So right, I can't remember what I was talking about now. I'm
Sorry,
going to
that
go back. I'm going to actually, let me open Oakhampton. So I'll just show you. Go on. Were you going to ask?
Sorry, Fiona. No, just to remind you, you were looking at that sort of starting from scratch. So you were going around the shapes in that big plan and just saying, you know,
Yes.
where you take it. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that is literally. If I'm not sure whether I've got maybe in that Lynch one. I've got the PDF still in there. Yeah, actually, so you can see in this plan, put that back on perspective. So here at the bottom is the PDF of it, and this PDF has got dimensions on it. So you can see that all I've done is draw over that plan. And the way the drawing works in SketchUp is if you draw a rectangle, so you draw around everything, make it a group, and then you just push and pull stuff up and down. So the combination of that kind of push and pulling stuff and moving stuff to get the right level, and then you just import stuff from the warehouse and place them, you know, that's basically how you're going to build your model up. It is always, the one thing I always get asked about is sloping sites. And what I would say is, if you're not going to read the slope in a visual, like imagine this is a giant garden and it's got a 1 meter height difference from kind of here, you know, to 200 meters away. Are you going to read that? If the answer is no, then just don't bother. Like this one here, unless there's a huge height difference dropping off, you know, I'm going to leave the whole thing as flat and not worry about terrain modeling, because once you start worrying about modeling the terrain, you know, it exponentially becomes a lot more work for you. And I think the returns are limited because you can always fluff it. You know, if you're looking down the garden, you know, you can within Photoshop, you know, you just make sure that those trees are a bit lower and kind of slightly tweak the angle. And are you really going to read it? Probably not. You just want to obviously make sure these are all steps up, you know, around here, and these are all flat surfaces. Just make sure they're right and they all tally up.
Okay.
So sorry, quick question, Fiona. Did you say that? So those trees you imported,
yeah,
do they come at what size do they come at? I mean, do you have to resize them in SketchUp?
you can resize them. If I just go back, yeah, they just come in. So people make these models. So this, to answer your question, Laura, the warehouse is the 3D warehouse, and it comes with, it's just part of SketchUp basically, and you press a button, the 3D warehouse opens, you know, and you get all of this stuff. And you see some of them, you know, like this one, you know, what is it? I don't know. Someone's just made something and uploaded it. So there's a lot of low quality stuff, but there's a lot of, you know, really high quality stuff. And some of it is kind of like 3D renderings, and, you know, you can see, actually that's quite good, willow tree.
Okay.
So yeah, that's it. It's just stuff, a place where you go to find stuff. If you put a more specific, let's put Acer tree in. So yeah, obviously once you start searching for more specific stuff, you'll find kind of better things that are more suited to your needs. If I put in echinacea, yeah, so then you find specific echinaceas, and I think this is the one that I've used. So you'll either get 2D stuff, which is flat and will angle towards the camera as you move, or you'll get 3D stuff like this one, which doesn't look quite as realistic, but is 3-dimensional. The advantages are you'll get realistic shadows off it, and you'll kind of just get a slightly different perspective.
Okay,
Yes,
thanks.
Martha, you do need to know the dimensions of something to scale off it, basically. Ideally, a scale bar is by far the easiest thing, and then you can just get the scale bar and scale it off that. If
Fiona, may I ask you a question? I know from my experience many years ago, I learnt Vectorworks and found it immensely complicated and probably forgot it. And therefore, I know that you have to be taught to use Vectorworks. Would you say that SketchUp you can teach yourself? Is it fairly intuitive?
I think so. Yes, and also if I just go to my web browser. SketchUp Make 2017. So the new versions of SketchUp, basically you have to use them online. The free versions, that is, not the pro. The pro one you download, and it's, I think, 50 quid. I think I sent the link out. There is a free version you can download to your computer. The last version that was free that you can actually download, and basically it looks the same, so they've not updated it. It's called SketchUp Make 2017. And so if you put that into Google, you'll get this link. Actually, I can just do that. I've posted it in the chat box. With regards to learning SketchUp yourself, there is a website called udemy.com, which I'm just putting in the chat box there as well, which has loads of different courses. And quite often, it's one of those weird websites where they just randomly do a massive sale. Like here, there's SketchUp Pro, oh, it's 2015, that's really why it's a bit cheaper. But they've got Master SketchUp, $13.99, a definitive guide from Infinite Skills. So, you know, stuff like that. And it should tell you, yeah, okay, so 5.5 hours worth of on-demand video, which might not sound like that much, but I can tell you when you're sitting there learning, you know, ideally what you would want to do is either have a spare laptop or an iPad next to you. So you'll have the course running on the iPad, it'll go, do this and blah, blah, blah. And you press pause and you go to, you know, you do it on your computer and then you play it again. And when you're learning like that, you know, 5 hours is bloody ages, basically.
Yeah. Sorry, another question about it. If you were somebody who was not familiar with any of these things, would you think that possibly by getting familiar with SketchUp and using it, it would help if you wanted to make the jump, just give you the confidence to make the jump to something like Vectorworks later on? Does it develop your skills and your confidence?
Not really. I'm not sure that the two are not very similar at all. The way that they draw.
No, I'm just thinking about confidence in a way. If you've
probably confidence, yes. SketchUp it's very pleasing and by far the more enjoyable of the two. I think if you're one of those people that really likes order and doing things methodically, Vectorworks is the better one because it's very accurate and you know, it can be slightly mundane, but is very ordered and it never does anything weird. SketchUp, you know, the way that I moved that object earlier and it was all attached to stuff and, you know, you're spinning around in this 3D geometry, you know, and there are ways of drawing things which are just, you know, you're almost building a model in a digital sense. You know, you can kind of draw a framework and, you know, drape almost, you know, a fill, a material over the top of it. So it's kind of more creative. But yeah, it probably would give you more confidence, I think, to use it in order to find something else. Oh, actually, I was going to show you one last thing, which is, maybe I'll just show you that. So there is an add-on. So this is slightly more advanced stuff for SketchUp. I don't know whether you've ever seen, who does them? What's his name? Rosebank Landscaping. It's not Matt. Oh, what is his name? But yeah, I'll have to try and remember his name. But they do really nice renders in their studio. So there is a package called V-Ray, and V-Ray plugs into SketchUp basically. So I'll just show you. So this is the SketchUp model. So these green blobs are trees that will only be sort of completed when you render the image. So it's a plugin, and I think it's 70 quid. I think I've got an educational version, and I think it's 70 quid for that. And then so you'll set up your scene and get all your plants in and everything. The rest of the model here, just zoom out a bit. You know, there's basically nothing here because, you know, I don't need to show the rest of the model. I've got another file with other plants for the rest of the garden because it makes it quite slow having these all 3D plants in there. So you get everything set up, you go to Extensions V-Ray and you render it and it ends up looking like that. And what it does is put a more realistic sky on, you know, it renders those trees. These plants are a lot more realistic compared to what you would have. There's, you know, paving texture. You can just about see. very high resolution. The vase on the table has got the glass on it and so on. So you can kind of get, you know, a much more accurate finish. And also, yeah, the tiles are a special texture that the light hits it slightly differently. And you can go really complicated and have every leaf on the hedge, which I haven't bothered to do. So yeah, that is another level with SketchUp that you can kind of take it up and be a lot further. I've got another example. Show you this. This is another example of the same technique on a different project. So you can get a lot more. It's playing with the light. There's a load of sciencey stuff about playing with the light. You've got the texture on the brick here, so the light's hitting each brick differently. The fabric on the chairs there. You know, obviously at the back of the garden here, you've got a different vibe with the shadows and everything. So yeah, if that's the kind of look you want to do, and yeah, again, you love computers and you know, you're happy to spend hours fiddling around on a computer, maybe you've got a graphics background. There is, yeah, you know, yeah, there's loads of different stuff that you can do. Some people have got a graphics background. I'm thinking there's a woman called Helen Sanders, who's a London College graduate. If you want to look at some cool work, go and have a look at her stuff. She sort of layers everything up in Photoshop.
So Fiona, I've got another question. Looking at what's on the screen now, looks really nice. Have you ever found, or the difficulty is you show somebody this, and then the garden gets planted up with small plants.
Oh, you said there'll be an Alchemilla mollis on the corner, and it's not there.
Or, oh, my garden's been, you know, now you've planted my garden and everyone's left, and, you know, or it's a year later and it's still not looking like it looked like in the picture. I mean, is there a danger of showing them something that's so attractive that they are just very disappointed by the reality?
Yeah, there probably is a danger. Yeah, I remember planting a garden for someone and they were like, but I thought it would look like Chelsea Flower Show. These are just sticks in the ground. But I think that's partly expectation management. Because
oh, yes. Yeah.
You know, yeah, I think you need to explain to them that this is what your garden is going to look like in like 3 or 4 years' time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I personally, I mean, I've learned this bit of software because at the time I didn't have anything else to do and I thought I'd learn it. I prefer a kind of a watercolory look. I think I've got, so actually what I've been doing recently, let's see if are those ones, is I use this software, but then I give them a watercolory look. So I find softening it back with the kind of watercolory vibe takes away some of the harshness and that kind of making all the plants identifiable, and it sort of makes it a bit more atmospheric, I think.
Yeah, yeah. Love that basin. That's fantastic, isn't it? Beautiful.
Yeah, yeah. It's just a quarter-end bowl, I think.
Oh God. I think there are a couple of questions that are floating around.
There are.
Yeah,
does any of this software take you through the changing garden seasons? No, but what you can do in SketchUp is, so you'll see here the shadow is on and there is a shadow settings button. I'm just going to turn off plants. Go a bit quicker. But yeah, there's a shadow settings button here, so you can set the time zone and you can set the date and the time. And what that will do is obviously change the length of the shadows. But you can also, in V-Ray, you can set like the time of day. So you would have it as, you know, is it going to be a sunset or whatever? Yeah, Vectorworks is kind of less of, I guess it's less of an issue really. For the stuff that you're drawing in Vectorworks. These trees as well, so the green blob trees are from a thing called Laubwerk, Laubwerk, and you can change the settings on the trees as to how many leaves they have. So you can show them, yeah, in autumn or winter when they haven't got any leaves, and it will just show the bare stem. Yes, Lucy Ward, did you mean we can ask about the changing seasons?
Yes, that was on behalf of Paula, who I don't think has a, oh no, maybe it's the camera she doesn't have.
Okay. Brilliant, yes, so yeah.
Covered.
Yes, you can change the shadow length and move stuff around basically to kind of, so yeah, you kind of can. what will be very difficult to do is to show, so say you've done a planting bed in SketchUp, you know, it will be very difficult to show that planting bed in winter versus summer. You'd have to kind of redo it. Say in one of them you've got, you know, taxus blocks and all of your summer perennials, then you'd kind of have to do a different version where you keep the taxus blocks and, you know, maybe most everything else would just be kind of ground level dead stuff and just soil, you know. So yeah, it doesn't quite work down to the perennial plant level. But yeah, you can kind of tweak the trees and the shadows and stuff like that. Any more questions on SketchUp?
So basically, you're always showing it in the best light, aren't you? Really, you're always showing it when
Yes.
the flowers. And so you've got to be careful that everything you put in there, showing in flowers at the same time, or else you're not going to.
I don't think you need to go to that level of detail unless you've got a really finicky client. You know, you're showing it to make it look, but most of these visuals, you know, you're showing them quite early on. So you go to them with a plan and visuals if you do the visuals, but there would probably still, in real life, still be some amends beyond that. So these visuals are quite early stages, and you'll probably go back and forth and agree the planting with them at a separate date. And you probably wouldn't, you know, you'd be agreeing the planting plan with them, you know, maybe in a month further down the line. You know, so these will probably be done maybe even before, you know, if you're pitching for work, which I think is a terrible idea and you should never have to do. But say they've paid you to pitch, you know, you won't be agreeing all the plants and so on now. You'd be doing that further down the line.
Okay.
Cool. So looking, I will just show you quickly SketchUp. Sorry, Photoshop. So yeah, a very quick way, and the way that I quite often do my drawings, is you export stuff from SketchUp. So you get your color export, and so that the layers, and going back to the layers in Photoshop, sorry, there's so much stuff to cover, I'm kind of like whizzing around. I could just talk for hours about it in really boring detail. So you get your exports from SketchUp. So you've made your model in SketchUp. In SketchUp, you go to File, Export, JPEG, and you'll just export it as a JPEG. You bring it into Photoshop. It's a layer, and these layers stack up. So like Vectorworks, transparent bits of paper, they all stack up on top of each other. And so you can kind of then apply like watercolor filters to things. There is an app called Sketcher format. I'm just writing that in the chat box. And that is basically what I've used to give this kind of watercolory feel. You'll see it, it's very popular on the London College of Garden Design students. Somebody emailed me from Capel asking about some of the London College students, and I can tell you a lot of them use this app, and it just gives it, you know, you can see down on the paving here, kind of that watercolory vibe to it. So you've got that, and then you can export from SketchUp the shadows separately. So I've put the shadows on as a separate layer, which allows me to change the opacity. So you can see here the opacity is only at 87. I felt that if I put the opacity of the shadows up higher, you know, that they would get a bit dark. So, you know, you can kind of tweak them so they're not too heavy. What I have done here, so I'm just going to change that. So although it looks like here that I've kind of drawn with a watercolor brush, what I've actually done is you export the line layers separately from Photoshop, from SketchUp. You then get an eraser and you get a watercolor brush, and you can download watercolor brushes off the internet. There are loads and loads of them, and you're using your eraser and your watercolor brush, and you're basically erasing through with your watercolor brush, and you can swap through and use different kind of brushes, you know, to change the style of it, or you can just use like a soft brush. One of the ones that comes with them, like this. Change the opacity down, and then you can kind of, you know, just rub it very softly coming through, get much lighter color that way, you know. So that is a very easy technique to look at. That if you want to Google that, it is called the Dennis technique. And that's, yeah, sorry, Dennis, D-I-N-N-I-S. That's kind of a very easy way to get those soft visuals. So yeah, you're exporting the color, the shadows and the lines, and then you're basically stacking them up and rubbing through the lines, and then the color, although it looks like you're brushing color on, you're not. You're just using a special watercolor brush, and that gives it that soft effect.
Fiona?
So are you saying you're rubbing colour off, really, effectively?
Yes, I've got the eraser tool up here.
I gotcha.
So yes. Who's going to ask the
Fiona,
question?
so it's Spencer.
Hi,
Spencer.
Spencer.
Right. She's very complicated, isn't it? No, I was just wondering. I noticed that you've not used masks on there, and I believe there's like a watercolor filter effect. If you go to filter effects, I think you get stylized, and there's different ways to apply the same.
There is, yeah. Do you know? I don't use, because it's so simple. I don't bother to use masks.
So it's just done as a visual, and you just sort of do it quite quickly.
Yeah, and actually, you'll see down here I've got originals. So actually, what I do is I bring in all the images. I just do it. You know, it's quite rare now that I make mistakes, and I don't need. So what Spencer's asking, there's a thing called masks, and masks kind of put another layer on your layer, so you're not actually affecting the original layer. You're not affecting the original image that you've brought in. And I think, yeah, if it's more complicated, I probably would do. But for this, I'm just like, you know, bish bash bosh. It's quite straightforward design, and I'm not going to do anything particularly weird. But yeah, there is.
You can brush things in, or sort of brush things out, and then brush them back in, and you're just affecting the mask rather than the original image.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, I sometimes use them, but generally it's quite straightforward, so I don't. But yeah, in Photoshop, filter gallery.
Yeah, that's one of the ones.
Brush on. Yeah, you can use that, and also you can layer them up as well. So you can change, so that's that one on, and you could put another one on. The opacity of this layer is 100%, but I might, you know, put another one on and change the opacity so that you kind of got the best of both filters.
Yeah. Okay. All right, thank you. Cheers.
No worries. Debbie, is it best to use a Mac for this rather than a PC? I like my Mac. I have got a PC as well. Macs are a lot more expensive, but I just think the user experience of a Mac for graphics is just a lot nicer. You do get, as a student, 12.5% off at the Mac store, which is a little known fact, a little known joy of being a student. But they are a lot more expensive. So no, they're much of a muchness. SketchUp, Photoshop, Vectorworks, they all work on both. So no, I mean, I wouldn't stress it. I think you'll always get people like me that like Macs, but are they better? You know, no, they're just different, I guess. In terms of power, you know, the rendering I showed you, to do those visuals, I generally have to leave my computer on overnight doing them. For me to get a more powerful computer to do that, it would be a lot cheaper for me to get a PC. You can get a lot more just sheer computer power as a PC, but Windows 10 is absolutely hideous and is just constantly irritating to use. So you're kind of, you know, you're weighing up those two things basically. I'm just going to move in. I'll just finish up with just showing you Vectorworks. So this is that file that I showed you. So in this file, you'll see I'm looking at the layers here. I've got my 3 design options in the same file. And I've got the sketches that the client showed me, which I just put off to the side as a guide, basically. So he sent me these 2 options. I put them there. So you'll see I've got options 1, I've got hard landscaping layer, planting, and then trees and plant lines. They stack up on top of each other. So this trees and plant lines, if I'm going to drag that down, it's now below the planting layer. You'll see you can't actually see the trees anymore. So if I drag that back up, all of that stuff will pop up above. Vectorworks, again, you've got the drawing tools, so you'll open up the software. There's loads and loads of stuff on the screen. I mean, Vectorworks is so complicated, which is why I think it's quite difficult to teach yourself. I'd say you have to be very technically minded to teach yourself Vectorworks. SketchUp, I think anyone could pick it up and have a go at drawing something.
Hi, can
Go
Good
for it.
question. Sorry, I did download Vectorworks, but I just for some reason managed to delete where it says on the other side of the screen, tool sets and basics. I pressed the X and I can't seem to get that.
That is window palettes. So on the window menu, palettes, and the ones that are ticked will be there. So if I deselect attributes, it goes, and then you go window palettes. Yeah, that's the first thing that we cover in the Vectorworks course. Is like I get everyone to close them all and bring them back. Yeah. So your basic tool palette here is your basic tools. So you'll click. If I just move that out the way, yep. So you click and move your mouse, you'll see I've got some dimensions attached to my mouse. So it kind of uses also an axis system. The x-axis, if you remember back to your GCSE or O-level maths, x is horizontal, positive x is right, negative x is negative x is left, y up is positive and down is negative. So you'll see I've clicked on the screen, I've moved my mouse. If I then lift my hand off the mouse and I'm going to type, oh, no, I'm not, it's not going to work. There, so I lift my hand off the mouse, if I type, say 5,000, I press tab and that will flip me onto the other side and I can type 5,000 again, press enter twice, and then I've drawn a 5 by 5 meter rectangle. So you're drawing like accurately to the millimeter. You can actually set it to be like decimal places of a millimeter and go that accurate. Again, the line tool, so you're just clicking. You can either click and click, or you can click and then type in, I don't know, 3,000 mil, a dimension, and have it be drawn stuff accurately. The planting tools are, so each of these tool sets down here, each one is they're a subset of more tools basically. So the first one is all the landscapey tools, the amount of stuff. So one thing to remember with Vectorworks, although there is loads of stuff in it, most of it you're never going to use. I've just got a question. Oh, Vanessa's asked, can you do any of this in Illustrator? I would talk to Spencer about that. Illustrator is great and you get the results look brilliant, and if you look at Spencer's work it looks brilliant, and I've had other students who are ex-graphic designers and they use Illustrator and it just looks great. However, it's not a scaled tool, so you're not drawing to scale in quite the same way. They're both vector drawing packages basically. So what vector drawing is that you are drawing a line from here to here and it just draws a line, whereas a raster image is like a photograph. So when I zoom in here, you'll see it's going to turn to pixels, whereas if I zoom in here, which is a vector image, it's not going to pixelate at all. So it's a way of drawing. So that other one, it's like this pixel is pink, this one is pink, this one's pink, this one's blue, this one's purple, whereas this one, it's like you draw this line from this point to this point and it just, there's no pixelation at all. So in that sense, the two bits of software are similar, but no, Illustrator, it just doesn't scale. It doesn't have the planting tools, it doesn't have the dimension tools and so on. Yeah, basically talk to Spencer about that. And I think, because he's done the Vectorworks course, that's why I'm specifically volunteering him. Sorry, Spencer, you can talk to everyone about that afterwards. So the plant, yeah, there's loads of stuff you're never going to need. So yeah, irrigation tools you're not going to need. There's a whole thing for drawing buildings and architects. There's like furniture and fittings, so like office blocks and tables and stuff. Whole thing on I-beams and different steel, box cut steel, bolts, cogs, sprockets and pulleys. So, a lot of it with Vectorworks, I always say, is just remembering where stuff is basically and just using what we're going to use. So the planting tools, the way that will work is you will set up all of your plants in advance. So I've set up a lot of plants in advance. Let's say I will pick this euphorbia. So you double click it and then you've got these plant modes here at the top. So there's a single plant placement mode. It's got a shadow on it. No shadow. So yeah, you've got a single plant, then you've got a manual plant placement, which means that I can put these plants wherever I want and set the spacing automatically, manually compared to how I'm placing them. Then there is another mode here, which uses the placing that you have set up within the plants. So I'm just going to go into this euphorbia. So let's say for Capel Manor, I think you have the plant so that they're just touching the edge of the other plant. So the spacing would be 1000. That is the center to center distance is the way that it works it out. If I go okay, and now put that in. So you'll see now I can draw with this tool a line of a plant and they're just touching at the edges. I can use the tool after that, we'll just draw like a box and put lots of plants in, and the tool after that will do the same thing, but it will just stagger them rather than being in a kind of grid format. I think the second one, you know, the first one and the second ones are the ones to use because they just look a lot more naturalistic. You know, you were always going to get some overlap, but you know, again, that kind of depends how you want to do your planting. So yeah, once those plants are set up, basically you will just have all of the plants that you've used, and I've kind of thrown them all into the same library. So you'll see some of them are fluffy things because that's how I set them up, but most of them are circles because I just think they look a bit neater. Some of them, they've got color on them. If you wanted to learn, so you'll get a year's license free with Vectorworks. My YouTube channel, and I am just going to do that. Yeah, if I do that and I put this in the chat box, I've got some videos about SketchUp and Vectorworks on my YouTube channel. If you've got a specific request and I can do a video, then I'm happy to do it. Oh, actually, yeah, there is a video creating your own custom plants in SketchUp, but I've got a playlist of how to do planting plans. And that is basically, I would say, again, you can ask Spencer, I think he's probably looked at this, but this will talk you through in 5 separate videos. So creating a plant, how to place the plant, how to put the plant tags on, how to customize the look of those plants, how to do more complex plant shapes, which I wouldn't use. There are some built-in Vectorworks ones, but they're quite ugly. And how to do the plant report, which is a schedule. So yeah, if you wanted to, I mean, you could literally just use the rectangle tool, draw a box, set up the plants, and then start placing them, and you could ignore the whole of the rest of Vectorworks. So if you wanted to use Vectorworks, you know, to do a planting plan, that is what I would say that you should be doing. Are there any more questions? I feel like I've kind of whizzed through everything.
Yeah, I did ask one. Once you're happy with your finished article in Photoshop, what do you do with it? Do you have to export it back out to print it off, or what?
Yeah, save it as a JPEG straight in Photoshop.
Okay.
Yeah, you just go File, Save As, and it will give you the option either a Photoshop file or JPEG. You do need to be careful of the resolution. So when you're exporting from SketchUp, you can set the resolution. I always do mine at 5,000 pixels, which should mean that they'll print out nicely at an A3 size. If you're just going to use them online or email, yeah, they could be slightly smaller. Vanessa's just asked why JPEG rather than PDF. A PDF in its nature is a vector drawing format. So PDFs and architectural plans and written text, those things are all vector formats of drawings. So PDFs work like that. I mean, I've got a computer science degree, so I kind of know how PDFs are created kind of in the back, you know, by the computer. And it is, you're going to draw a line from this point to this point. Whereas a JPEG is by image, a raster. You can't change a JPEG or a PDF. You know, they're both, you can create a new PDF and a new JPEG. And you can import a PDF into Photoshop, but if you do that, it will then do something called rasterizing it, which will then turn it back into a format that is pixelated, basically. So yeah, you can't edit PDFs and you can't edit JPEGs. You'll just create a new version of them, basically edit it and create a new version. Steve, did that answer your question? I just moved on to another one. I'll take that as a yes. Any other questions? I think I might wrap it up here, really. I feel like I've covered everything. You know, obviously.
Sorry, I was going to ask a question. I couldn't type quick enough.
Go for it.
Does the planting part of Vectorworks come automatically in Vectorworks?
So you want to get Vectorworks landmarks. So there's different kind of flavors of Vectorworks, because they do, obviously there's the architectural stuff, there's landmark, but they also do, there's an engineering one, and there's one for like set design and theatre. So Vectorworks landmark is the landscape design one.
Okay, great, thank you.
No worries.
I had a very basic question.
Go for it.
If you were to use PowerPoint, for example, rather than Vectorworks, and you've drawn your scale drawing by hand, and you wanted to bring it into PowerPoint, could you then draw your scale? Because I worked out how to use the scaled circles. Can you put the scale circles on top of the PDF? But I couldn't bring the PDF. I couldn't work out how to bring my PDF of the scale drawn plan into PowerPoint.
I think what I would do is set up PowerPoint so that your sheet size is an A3 sheet.
Yeah, done that.
Have your drawing so that it's drawn at A3, and you know, and then make sure that it's taking up 100% of the page.
Yeah.
And then you should be able to put your circles on top of that.
I couldn't bring the picture. I couldn't bring the PDF in.
In PowerPoint.
Yeah, it gave me the option of making it, you know, a button that I press on to give a demonstration.
Yeah, I think Hannah. I think.
Oh, so I need to do it as a JPEG. I wondered that. Yeah.
I don't really use PowerPoint much. But yeah, I think it probably would need to be a JPEG.
Oh, look, people are saying
right.
PDF to PPT. Okay. I need to rescan it then and change its format.
Yes.
Okay.
Talk to Noriko, I think.
Yeah.
He's the one who's just
Oh, okay.
Cool.
Okay, so I think Noriko has obviously done it. So maybe Martha, if you just talk to Noriko, she might be able to tell you how to do it.
Yeah.
Can I, Noriko, can I give you my email address on here, and then Noriko, you could get in touch with me? Or Melinda, could you give me her? Oh no, here she is.
Be good to share that with everyone.
Okay. How do we do that?
Well, we got an email.
Fiona.
Yeah, WhatsApp. WhatsApp's a good. Yeah, WhatsApp.
And
yeah,
actually,
you are gonna learn.
Okay.
Sorry, Fiona. You've got all the email addresses.
So that's the only thing.
Yeah. Sorry, go on, Fiona.
Oh, I was going to say, yeah, you are going to learn this stuff. You know, it is actually nice to have a WhatsApp group. And I always say to the evening class students, you know, get a little WhatsApp, because it's so easy to get your phone and just take a picture of your screen and go, I can't remember how to do this. You know, because it can be really frustrating, you know, if you can't remember how to do something. So if you are on WhatsApp, find a bunch of people who are kind of your level, you know, or better than you. Ideally, hanging out with people that are better than you at something is the best way to learn something. And then, yeah, then you can just chat really quickly, and it makes it much less frustrating.
Can I ask one thing while everyone's on the group chat? So you import your, I make my PDF into a PPT or a JPEG.
Yeah.
And then can you put your circles on top of that?
Yes, you should be able to. Yeah, you should be able to.
Fine.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Any more questions?
Fiona, one thing I'd like to say is that if anyone's feeling a little bit overwhelmed by this, it is perfectly possible to go ahead and just keep drawing those circles by hand. And the fact is, you do get quicker at it. And so if you're wondering whether or not to spend the time learning how to do it by computer or going and doing it by hand, but you know, and you're not certain about the computer, just keep doing it by hand. And you know, eventually, if you get enough work, then you might switch over. But don't feel anyone pressured into trying to fit in learning how to do it by computer, especially now when there's so much else going on. You know, just keep plugging on and by hand, and it's amazing how much quicker you'll get.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Any other questions for Fiona? Okay. All right. So I think that's really helpful. Thank you very much indeed. I've learned a lot.
Yeah, if people do have questions, I'm happy. I don't know whether you've got my email address, but I'm happy if you want to email me. It's not like I've got a raging social life and, you know, I'm off on holiday. So, you know, if you do feel free to, to drop me a line.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Thank you, Fiona.
No worries.
And Fiona, most important thing, how's Ellie?
Ellie is, there's Ellie. That's how Ellie is. She's fast asleep on the sofa. It's a very stressful life being a dog because she just gets a ridiculously good walk every day and then just sleeps. So.
just before we go, I'd just like to say I've done Fiona's course and I thought it was really, really good, really informative, and I learned a lot. And I learned you know, the limitations of Vectorworks, what it can and can't do, and how you would apply it. And I think it's actually, if you're able to, I would highly recommend doing the course. And it's very digestible, very relaxed, and really enjoyable. But the thing with Vectorworks is, from my point of view, it's not just about drawing circles for a planting plan. It encompasses everything, such as, you know, the hard landscaping aspects to it, the fact that you've got a renderable file at the end of it to use for other you know, other uses such as SketchUp. You know, you can export things as PDF. You've got the line work to be able to do it. So it's quite an in-depth program, but I think it's an excellent insight into that you would actually use it on a daily basis. But I would highly recommend doing the course. I really would. Great. So yeah, thank you again, Fiona, for that.
No worries. Thanks, Spencer.
Right,
it's not running in September though. The next one I don't think is going to be until January.
Oh, that's a shame.
Yeah.
Well, actually,
I say that maybe it will run in September. It's not running. Obviously, not running this term.
No. Well, maybe that.
We'll have to see.
Maybe you ought to get people to you know, email and ask for it once they're back.
Yeah. Yeah.
That reminds me of what Spencer said, of another thing, which is of course interesting, that those people who are doing plants and planting now and are going on to do principles and practice, then, you know, in a way that's something that you may really well think about doing, because it means that you could be drawing your plans very accurately for principles and practice from the start with Vectorworks, which cuts out the time. You can play around with design once you've got a really good accurate plan. So anyone who's just going to do plants and planting and stop there, probably not worth it. But anyone who's going to go on with principles, you know, may well be worth thinking of a bit more, because it could be quite really useful.
Yeah, I would say, going back to that whole thing, if your time is your money, you know, when you're at college, you're not getting paid, so you may as well use that time to learn everything you can. Because if you then leave college and you'll want to be making money as soon as you leave, and then if you've got to go and learn Vectorworks, it's an extra kind of thing to have to do. So if you can face it, I would say, you know, learn it whilst you're at college if you can.
Okay, any other questions? That's great, Fiona. I think that's, you know, everyone seems to be stunned into silence.
Yeah, I know. So I find it difficult to kind of, because I don't have a syllabus, obviously. Normally when I teach, I've got a syllabus and like go through it methodically. Here, I'm like, oh my God, I just talk about everything. So yeah, it's slightly chaotic, I'm afraid.
Well, it was, you know, we just wanted you to do what we normally do, is that get the, you know, get an introduction, and which was great. I mean, I thought it was really useful. So thank you very much indeed.
Can I throw in a question? as a user of Illustrator and InDesign and whatnot, I'm a bit floored, I have to admit, by the look of Vectorworks, and it's just the thought of learning something new horrifies me. So, do you think I could get away with just learning SketchUp and combining it with my hand drawn, well, not my hand drawn, but my you know, creative suite of InDesign already? Would I get away with that? Look,
yeah, I think so. I mean, at the end of the day, it's about communicating. You know, you're communicating to your client, you're communicating obviously what you're going to do in the process, you're going to communicate how it's going to look, and you're communicating with the contractor to get it built. So as long as you are doing that properly and accurately, you know, it doesn't really matter how you're doing it.
Because you mentioned that Illustrator's not what did you say? It was about not, you know, not necessarily being.
Spencer, can you come back on and talk about Illustrator for a second, please, and explain that? I think you'll be able to explain it more accurately.
Yeah, I can do. I mean, I think the main difference between Vectorworks and Illustrator, they're both vector programs, both work in line work, so it doesn't matter what size you render them at, it will always be sharp lines, and that's what a vector program does. But the main difference between them is if you were working in Illustrator, you would have to work in scale because otherwise the documents will be enormous. But when you're working in Vectorworks, you are working in real size, even though, so essentially it's an infinite canvas. And I would say you can create some really nice visuals in Illustrator, especially for line work and layout. But as far as planting plans go, you would need to, what I have to do is when I've done them is I have to label everything by hand. And as frustrating as the labels can be in Vectorworks sometimes, when you get your head around it, it's a lot quicker and easier once you've got the hang of it, I would say. But the thing with Illustrator,
I can't imagine that being worth 2,400.
I would say it depends how much you're going to use it. Like Fiona said, you know, if you got say for instance you landed a job and they said, oh, you know, it's this project's going to go on for a year, but we need you to draw everything in Vectorworks and you'll get paid X amount to do it. Yeah. And then it could be worth your while.
Fair point.
And the other thing as well is Vectorworks is industry standard, so that when you export your vector file, you know you can pass it on to other people who would also be able to use that file. Whereas Illustrator, you know, if you're a cottage industry, pardon the expression, you know, you could you'll just get away with it and you could just produce your visuals. But if you're working with corporate clients, I would say that Vectorworks is sort of it's a remedial program that you would need. I think it's just industry standard. And you know, for instance, when let's say an architect supplies you a CAD file, it's all interchangeable with Vectorworks, and that's not the case necessarily with Illustrator, because you put it in and it would be enormous. So there's pros and cons to both, but I think it does depend how you're going to use it, and also, you know, how much you're going to use it. So that's what I would say. But I think the main differences are those points really. You would have to work in scale for Illustrator. And the planting plans, you would have to label everything up manually. There are labeling tools in Illustrator, but they're not great. You can't control it how you would probably like to. But I would say they're the main things. So for me, I mean, Fiona, if you want to add anything.
No, I think that covers it really.
Okay, thanks, Spencer.
That's all right, no
problem. So what are you planning on doing in the future?
Sorry, me?
Yeah, which are you going to start using Vectorworks? Are you going to stay with Illustrator? I thought you said you were going to stick with Illustrator short term.
No, you're not.
Oh, sorry.
Short term, I will be, but I think long term, I've got an eye on the Vectorworks thing. Okay. But I mean, Fiona made a really good point that if you get some work experience in a design studio, landscape architects or something, you can use the software there and learn to use it there. And you will probably be able to use it at home as well for your own projects. So that's a really cheap way of learning it if you've got the time and inclination. But you know, it is a big outlay initially, but I think for the moment, because the thing is, I've sort of invested a bit of time and effort in setting everything up on my Illustrator file. So, you know, I've got like a suite of stuff, like a library of plant circles and different shapes and sizes and templates and, you know, my title blocks and all that kind of stuff set up. So with a view to using it, you know, for this,
get you through the course. Yeah.
But unfortunately, I don't think it's probably got much longevity if I wanted to expand into working for more corporate clients. I think that would run out pretty quickly. So, but yeah, I mean, for the short term, I'm going to stick with it. But the longer term, I'll probably looking at Vectorworks, or the other one was the Shoot software. But I haven't looked too closely at that, but I think essentially it's the same principle as Vectorworks rather than Illustrator. So I don't know if you've ever used that, Fiona.
I was just going to come in because I work as an architect, and I don't know if it's useful, but we work a lot with landscape designers, and we tend to ask for, I mean, they're on bigger housing projects, but we tend to ask from the landscape architects or the designers for DWGs or Vectorwork drawings that we can then bring into our architectural plans so that those drawings can sit behind the buildings. And generally we then have them as a DWG or Vectorworks drawing that we can import and use. It's normally on bigger scale projects. I'm not talking about small scale houses, but I don't know if that's useful for people to know.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, too. Definitely working with architects is like, yeah, you really need to up your game because their drawings are just so insanely detailed, and yeah, that's definitely going to be the one area. But if you're a garden designer, architects is just such a great source of work because obviously they're doing all these new builds and refurbs, and if you've got a relationship with an architect, it's like, you know, a solid stream of high quality work basically, plus you're going to have the logistical advantage of the house being renovated so you can get the garden stuff in at the same time.
Anything else, anyone? Well, thank you very much, Fiona, for your time.
No worries, not at all.
That's really interesting. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for being so attentive and coming in. Fantastic attendance we're getting, so that's really great.
Yeah, no, it's good, isn't it?
It is. It's really, really impressive. So yeah, we will be in touch with all of you. Sophie and I will be in touch again next week, giving you the link and telling you what we're going to be doing and stuff like that. And I'm available if anyone wants to email me and ask me to give them a ring. That's absolutely fine. Sophie's available as well. Okay. So apart from that, let's hope that we all have as nice a weekend as possible under the circumstances. And thanks, Fiona. And bye-bye.
No worries. Have a good weekend.
Thanks. Bye.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.